Most people think wealth starts in the bank, but in homes I've studied, it often starts with something far simpler. The table, not the furniture itself, but how it's used. Some families treat their dining table like a sacred space, a place for nourishment and conversation and calm. Others unknowingly turn it into a magnet for chaos, stacking bills, dropping keys, or leaving half-finished things that send quiet messages of stress, avoidance, and energetic fatigue. And here's what few people realize. The table is where financial energy either gathers or escapes. Today, I'll walk you through 5 specific items that quietly support long-term wealth, harmony, and clarity, objects found on the tables of grounded, prosperous homes. These aren't superstitions or lucky charms. They're energetic anchors, and they work. I'll also show you 4 very common mistakes, things many of us leave on the table every day without realizing they're subtly repelling peace, prosperity, and connection. This isn't about spending money or redecorating your house. It's about understanding how energy lives where you eat, sit, and gather, and how small shifts can create real results. If this kind of insight resonates with you, I'd be honored if you liked this video, shared it with someone who's building a more intentional home, and subscribed to New Day Mindfulness. We're close to 2,000 subscribers, and your support helps us continue sharing timeless, grounded content that's rooted in energy, not hype. Now let's begin with one of the most powerful and most overlooked wealth magnets people place right at the heart of their home. Item 1, fresh flowers. Fresh flowers are one of the simplest and most underestimated sources of energetic vitality in a home, yet they remain one of the most consistent features across the dining tables of successful, grounded individuals. In Feng Shui, flowers don't just beautify a space, they are living conductors of Qi, the life force that governs harmony, circulation, and prosperity. Their presence speaks to renewal, movement, and conscious attention. And unlike static decor, they require engagement. You must select them, place them with intention, care for them, and eventually release them. That entire cycle mirrors healthy financial energy, intentional intake, appreciation, release, and regeneration. While any fresh flower carries some benefit, color and condition are key. Yellow and orange blooms, such as marigolds, sunflowers, and golden chrysanthemums, stimulate the earth and fire elements in Feng Shui, which are deeply tied to stability and material abundance. Red-toned flowers, especially soft reds like coral or warm rose, activate auspicious energy in the wealth corners of the home, inviting prosperity through action and confidence. It's no accident that cultures around the world have associated flowers with celebration, memory, and status. But their presence must remain alive. Wilted petals, brown leaves, or neglected vases don't just neutralize energy, they reverse it. They quietly communicate stagnation, distraction, or lack of emotional availability. This is why artificial flowers, no matter how realistic, can never replace the Qi offered by living ones. Placement also plays a critical role in how floral energy influences the home. Flowers should be placed low enough to invite the eye naturally, ideally below eye level when seated, so they invite unity and openness rather than competition or hierarchy. A simple glass vase in the center of the table with an odd number of stems, odd numbers are more energetically active, creates a gentle visual rhythm that helps soften the dynamic at shared meals, particularly if emotions run high or schedules are tight. This becomes even more important in homes where the dining table is used not just for eating, but for discussion, decision-making, or even remote work. The presence of soft floral energy can act as a psychological reset, helping all who sit around it breathe more slowly, speak with more care, and connect with a little more grace. But perhaps the most compelling validation of this principle doesn't come from books on energy. It comes from people who have nothing left to prove. Oprah Winfrey, whose Montecito estate is known for its serenity and beauty, has often spoken about her habit of keeping fresh flowers in multiple rooms of her home, including her dining area. Not for aesthetics alone, but because they serve as what she calls emotional nutrients. To her, they are not decor. They are a gesture of respect to the space, a nod to nature's presence indoors, and a reminder that beauty and abundance are worth tending to daily. That mindset, the willingness to invest in small, nourishing rituals, is often what separates temporary wealth from enduring prosperity. Even beyond Oprah, florists who serve high-net-worth clients often note that regular flower deliveries to dining tables are not requested just before parties or holidays. They're part of the routine. The wealthy often understand, consciously or not, that the state of the dining table influences how meals feel, and how meals feel influences how the household relates to nourishment, conversation, and financial flow. Because when your table feels alive, your home does too. In practical terms, rotating your flower choice based on season or energy need is also a subtle but effective way to refresh the space's tone. During months of change or uncertainty, grounding earth flowers like yellow daffodils or brown-centered sunflowers can create stability. During periods of ambition or growth, tall red gladiolus or orange tulips can stoke fire and inspiration. During moments of grief, closure, or emotional transition, white lilies or pale roses can assist in quiet, reflective clearing. Of course, not every week may allow for a fresh bouquet, but even one stem in a clear bud vase, placed with sincerity, can carry the same energetic intent. The point is not extravagance, it's presence. Choosing to invite nature into the heart of your home reminds you, meal after meal, that energy responds to care. And care, in its simplest form, creates wealth that cannot be measured by digits alone. So the next time you find yourself wondering why your home feels off, why your meals feel rushed, or why your money doesn't seem to stay, it might not be your mom or your income. It might be your table, and it might be asking gently for something to bloom again. Fresh flowers aren't magic, but they are memory. And for the energy of your space to rise, sometimes all it takes is something small and alive, placed right in the center where attention and intention meet. Item 2, a symbolic centerpiece that reflects abundance. Not all abundance speaks loudly. In fact, some of the most powerful invitations to wealth, harmony, and clarity come in the form of quiet, intentional objects placed at the heart of the home. A well-chosen centerpiece is not just decoration, it is declaration. It tells the space and everyone who enters it, this table has a purpose. This household is awake, and energy is welcome here. Unlike decorative clutter or seasonal trend pieces that come and go with no deeper resonance, a symbolic centerpiece acts as a stable energetic anchor, one that holds the table in balance and reinforces the idea of completeness, continuity, and conscious presence. In Feng Shui, this role is more than aesthetic. The object at the center of a dining table sets the tone for conversation, emotional flow, and even how easily prosperity moves through the home. That's why the most powerful centerpieces are not flashy or oversized. They're chosen with care, and they speak to a family's values, not its vanity. The best forms for centerpieces, from a Feng Shui perspective, are round or oval. These shapes carry the energy of wholeness. There are no edges to trap or block chai, and they naturally invite inclusiveness. Unlike pointed decor or angular sculptures, which can create unspoken emotional friction, a curved, smooth object quietly says, "You're safe here. You're included. You belong." Think of a polished wooden bowl filled with seasonal fruits, a simple ceramic urn made by hand, or a carved gourd passed down through generations. These items carry the energetic signature of fullness, grounded receptivity, and continuity. They are rooted but not rigid, meaningful but not loud. That's what you want anchoring the middle of your table, something with weight, yes, but not dominance. An object that gives your eyes somewhere to rest without overwhelming the entire field of view. Weight is an often overlooked element in centerpieces. A meaningful object should have enough density or substance to feel present in the room, even when no one is sitting at the table. It might be something literal, like a stone sculpture, a low pottery vessel, or a brass bowl. Or it could be metaphorical, something that holds sentimental or cultural weight. In Vietnamese households, for example, pomelos and tangerines are often displayed during Lunar New Year as living symbols of abundance and sweetness. Their roundness, their scent, their deep golden tones all contribute to a vibration of welcome and prosperity. But these displays aren't just for tradition. They're energetic choices. They remind the home we are calling in completion. We are preparing space for more. Of course, the idea isn't to place fruit just once a year. A year-round centerpiece can be refreshed with seasonal offerings that still carry the same intent. Apples in autumn, persimmons in early winter, fresh herbs or green citrus in spring. What matters isn't how much you place, but the clarity with which you place it. A bowl overflowing with too much, especially if it's never refreshed, can tilt the energy toward excess or overwhelm. Likewise, a single object sitting lonely in a massive space can feel like scarcity, not elegance. The balance is in choosing a piece that is scaled to the table and to the life of the home. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to say, this is where energy gathers, and this is where it is held with care. I've seen homes where a single marble dish, handed down from a grandmother, sits at the center of the table and anchors the entire home's energy. It isn't expensive, but it's revered. I've also seen ultra-luxury homes with massive centerpieces that feel cold, heavy, and disconnected, selected by decorators, not by heart. And the difference is palpable. One draws you in, the other keeps you emotionally at the surface. Remember, a centerpiece is not just for show, it's a tool, a soft focus point that can calm your nervous system before a difficult conversation. A visual symbol that reminds you to breathe before your first bite. A quiet partner in your rituals, whether you're eating alone or gathered with loved ones. And when chosen wisely, it becomes a mirror of your household's relationship with wealth. Not just material, but emotional, relational, and spiritual. So take a look at your table. What sits at its center? Does it feel alive? Does it feel intentional? Or is it simply what was left behind? Replacing it doesn't require a shopping trip. It only requires a shift in awareness. What object already in your home holds meaning, balance, and quiet strength? What could you place there to say, we're ready to receive not just food, but fortune? Because in a world that moves fast, that asks you to produce constantly and consume endlessly, a stable, intentional centerpiece is more than just a beautiful object. It's a daily reminder to return to center. And sometimes that's all the energy needs to start flowing in the right direction again. Item 3, a salt or water bowl. Among all the items one can place at the center of a dining table, few carry as much quiet, energetic intelligence as a bowl of water or a small dish of salt. While these may seem minimalist or purely decorative at first glance, their impact on the emotional and energetic temperature of a space can be profound. In Feng Shui practice, both salt and water are elements of cleansing, but in very different ways. Salt is dense, absorptive, and energetically grounding. It absorbs emotional static, collects residue from tense exchanges, and settles jittery qi that hasn't found release. Water, in contrast, flows. It's responsive, reflective, and connected to intuition. Where salt anchors, water listens. Together they form a soft, stabilizing presence that regulates the unseen dynamics in a shared space, especially one like the dining table, where people come together to speak, eat, think, and feel. What makes this practice even more compelling is its subtlety. A shallow glass bowl filled with pink Himalayan salt or a small clear cup of water does not announce itself. It doesn't compete for attention like a sculpture or floral display. Instead, it quietly does its work, absorbing the tension that accumulates between meals, diffusing emotional heaviness left over from rushed conversations or unfinished thoughts. And it reinforces a foundational principle of energetic balance, that all energy must be moved, shifted, and refreshed to stay beneficial. Stagnant energy, whether emotional or environmental, is what turns even the most beautiful homes into places of restlessness, fatigue, or disconnection. That's why ritual maintenance is essential here. Leaving water unchanged for days or letting salt harden into a forgotten crust sends the opposite message. It tells the space, we aren't paying attention. Energy isn't moving. We're too distracted to notice. On the other hand, a daily moment of checking the bowl, replacing the water, stirring the salt, or wiping the dish acts as both an energetic reset and a psychological recentering. It becomes a micro-ritual of stewardship, a reminder that the atmosphere of the home is something we create, not something we passively endure. I've often found that households where communication feels blocked, where family members speak over one another, or avoid the table altogether, are also homes where the salt bowl is dusty or the water is murky. In fact, I've had clients tell me they checked the bowl after a difficult dinner and found the water discolored, the salt unusually clumped, or even a fine layer of dust settled on top. These aren't accidents. They're reflections. They're signals that emotional weight has entered the space and needs release. From a practical perspective, choose vessels that match the emotional tone you want to cultivate. A round glass bowl with a slight blue tint evokes tranquility and openness. A small handmade ceramic dish creates earthiness and rootedness. If you prefer salt, opt for coarse pink or white grains. Avoid tea'd or chemically treated types. Place the bowl near the center of the table, but not in the way of conversation or food. It's meant to support energy, not interrupt it. And if your table is small, even a tiny glass ramekin or teacup can serve the same function. Over time, this bowl becomes something more than a dish. It becomes a sentinel of the room's emotional climate. You'll start to notice how it changes depending on the week, the weather, or the guests you host. It's a subtle feedback mechanism that helps you become more attuned to the unseen patterns in your home. And that awareness is its own form of wealth. Because when you're able to recognize the early signs of energetic misalignment, you can correct course with ease. You don't wait until tension becomes conflict or until exhaustion becomes burnout. You tend to the chi daily, just as you would tend to your finances, your relationships, or your body. In that way, the salt or water bowl is not just an object, it's a practice, a reminder that peace doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it just needs a quiet bowl of water, refreshed before sunrise, or a pinch of salt, stirred with intention and presence. This is the kind of subtle power that turns a table into a sanctuary, and a home into a place where people not only live, but truly exhale. Item 4, a single candle or source of warm light. Among the most humble yet energetically potent objects you can place on a dining table is a single softly burning candle. In the language of Feng Shui, this is the element of fire, not the kind that rages or overwhelms, but the controlled glow that sharpens the mind, softens the heart, and activates the kind of presence that prosperity depends on. While most people think of fire in terms of action and ambition, its deeper energetic function in a home is illumination, not just visually, but spiritually and emotionally. A warm flame lights more than a room. It signals readiness, clarity, life in motion. In many traditional Japanese households, it's not uncommon to find a single tea light flickering quietly near the dining area during evening meals. This isn't about ambience or trend, it's a cultural expression of reverence, a subtle but powerful reminder that eating is not just physical, it's relational, it's energetic. And the table, when lit, becomes a temporary altar. The flame isn't there to entertain, it's there to bless. And whether you're eating alone or gathered with loved ones, that single point of light invites a slower breath, a more grounded bite, a moment of true presence. Choosing the right candle, though, is more than picking something that smells nice. In fact, from a Feng Shui and energetic standpoint, overly perfumed candles can clutter the space. They overstimulate the senses, dilute focus, and, ironically, disconnect you from the very calm they claim to create. Instead, the candle you choose should reflect the tone you want your home to hold. Opt for soft, full-spectrum hues like amber, cream, or deep orange, colors that naturally align with the lower chakras and reinforce the fire element without aggression. The flame should be steady, not erratic. Its container should add, not disrupt, the energy. Glass holders are especially useful as they create a reflective partnership between water and fire, helping to temper extremes and harmonize intention. More important than what the candle looks like, however, is how you interact with it. A candle that is lit with presence carries far more power than a designer one forgotten in the background. Equally important, when the candle burns out, remove it. A spent wick left untouched sends a message of fatigue. Energetically, it becomes a symbol of stalled vision, like a dream that was once lit but has now lost its heat. In a space where energy is meant to circulate and renew, such symbols matter. A fresh candle, on the other hand, rekindles intention. It says, "We begin again." This small gesture, a candle lit before dinner or while preparing a meal, can also become a personal ritual. Not for performance, but for transition. In a world where people often go from Zoom meetings straight to dinner plates without a breath in between, the act of lighting a candle can serve as a bridge, a signal to the body and the mind that one chapter is ending and another, more nourishing one, is beginning. In homes where financial stress runs high or where relationships feel strained, the simple flame becomes an invitation to pause, to speak kindly, to return to each other. I've seen this work firsthand. In a client's home where arguments at dinner were common and money discussions routinely turned tense, we introduced nothing dramatic. Just one sand-colored candle placed at the center of the table and lit each night. Within weeks, not only did the tone at meals soften, but the couple found themselves having more productive conversations around budgeting and future planning. It wasn't magic, it was intentionality. The candle became a new rhythm, and energy followed. So the next time you sit down at your table and feel the space is flat, stagnant, or heavy, don't reach for a bigger centerpiece. Start smaller. Light a single flame, sit with it. Let it remind you that energy doesn't have to shout to shift. Sometimes it only needs a spark, a quiet signal that something sacred is happening here, that this home still has fire in its heart. Item 5. Something gold or red. In every thoughtfully composed home, there are subtle cues that guide the flow of energy, not through noise or extravagance, but through intentional touches of color. Of all the hues available, red and gold remain two of the most historically powerful when it comes to wealth, confidence, and mature abundance. These are not simply lucky colors as pop culture sometimes reduces them to. In energy work, and particularly in Feng Shui, they are activators, symbols of movement, trust, and readiness. When used correctly, they don't dominate a space. They shape it. They whisper to the nervous system, Here you are welcome to expand. Red is the color of fire and grounded action. It sharpens intention, emboldens choices, and lends courage to conversations that might otherwise go unspoken. When integrated into the dining table, not as an overwhelming theme, but as a subtle accent, it reinforces vitality. It strengthens the sense that this space is alive, energized, and emotionally engaged. Whether it's a red runner down the center of the table, a single crimson napkin placed intentionally, or even a small cloth folded beneath a centerpiece, the presence of red signals authority without aggression. It stabilizes, it warms, it holds the room together. Gold, by contrast, carries the essence of completion and maturity. Where red initiates, gold affirms. It doesn't shout, it glows. It's the color of harvest, not just effort, of wisdom, not just ambition. When gold is used around the table, in the trim of a coaster, the rim of a serving bowl, or the frame of a nearby photograph, it elevates the tone of the space. The room feels a little more thoughtful, a little more refined. It's the difference between wealth that is newly acquired and wealth that is understood, appreciated, and quietly held. The key, though, is subtlety. Red and gold are not to be plastered across the room like a festival banner. They are not a wall color or a furniture set. Think of them more like seasoning, a pinch that transforms the entire flavor without overpowering it. One well-placed golden detail can do more for the energy of a room than a dozen mismatched decorations. One clean, purposeful red accent can anchor a space in confidence far more than a loud pattern. But perhaps the most important detail, and one that is too often overlooked, is meaning. Energetically, it's not just the color that speaks, it's the story behind it. A gold-edged tray passed down from a grandparent holds more resonance than one pulled off a clearance shelf. A red linen gifted during a joyful occasion carries deeper weight than something bought in haste. The object must hold personal memory, personal frequency. Otherwise, the color becomes just a surface, an empty costume lacking Shui. An energy, like people, can tell the difference between sincerity and show. In one consultation, I visited the home of a quietly successful entrepreneur who never displayed his wealth openly. His home was modest, calm, almost minimalist. But on his dining table sat a lacquered red box, small and unassuming, that had belonged to his mother. Inside it, he kept nothing but a few folded notes and a dry jasmine flower. When I asked about it, he said simply, "It reminds me that everything I've built had a beginning, and that beginning was her faith in me." That box, its red surface worn slightly with time, anchored the room in more abundance than any gold leaf chandelier could have. This is the essence of wealth, energetically speaking. It's not accumulation, it's alignment. It's choosing what you place in your field of vision with awareness. Not for show, for presence, for remembrance, for quiet power. So when you choose your red or gold element for your dining space, don't think about what looks trendy. Think about what reminds you of your strength, your story, your readiness to receive without grasping and to grow without rushing. Because in the end, these colors aren't decorations. They're signals, invitations. They remind the room and everyone seated around the table that prosperity doesn't just happen. It's welcomed, it's honored, and it thrives where energy is tended with intention. Mistake 1, placing personal finance items on the table. The dining table is where energy settles. Not just the kind you see in plates or chairs, but the kind you feel when you sit down. The energy of intention, emotion, and invisible patterns carried in from the rest of the day. And one of the most overlooked ways that energy becomes distorted is by placing financial documents. Bills, checkbooks, wallets, overdue notices, even digital tablets with budgeting spreadsheets onto the table where meals and conversations are meant to nourish. At first, it may seem practical. Maybe you were reviewing bills during breakfast or finalizing tax prep after dinner. Maybe your wallet ended up there by habit. But these are not neutral items. From an energetic perspective, financial documents and tools carry concentrated emotional charge. They hold narratives of scarcity, deadlines, responsibility, uncertainty, especially if those items are associated with stress. And when you place them on a table that is supposed to represent abundance, unity, and grounding, they create an energetic mismatch. It's like placing an open file folder of anxiety next to your soup bowl. The food may still be warm, the conversation pleasant, but underneath it all, there's an invisible undercurrent pulling the room's energy into alert mode. The body, even without words, begins to associate the space with calculation, caution, or even subtle dread. This tension may show up in subtle ways. You may find that family meals feel rushed, that children fidget more or talk less. You may notice that conversations drift toward worry, or that your appetite dulls without obvious reason. That's not random. It's resonance. Qi responds to what we introduce. In financial papers, especially those associated with debt or pressure, introduce a frequency of urgency. Even something as seemingly benign as a wallet, if left open on the table, can project a vibration of spending, loss, or exposure. These things belong in a place where decisions are made, not where relationships are nurtured. I once spoke with a CEO of a mid-sized company who shared something that stayed with me for years. She said, "I never bring paperwork into my kitchen or dining area, ever. I don't want to chew stress with my salad." And she meant it. Her kitchen was calm, her table always clear, and even her kids knew if something needed discussing, it waited until the meal was done and the table reset. That boundary wasn't just about tidiness. It was about preserving the emotional sanctity of the space. And it worked. Her home felt like an exhale. Even in high-pressure weeks, the dining table remained a place of renewal. There's a deeper principle at work here, one rooted in both Feng Shui and lived experience. Energy concentrates where we repeatedly place our attention. If the dining table becomes a stage for money stress, then even joyful meals will feel partially contaminated. Over time, that seeps into your home's overall tone, where abundance starts to feel distant and connection begins to fragment. Fortunately, the remedy is simple. Create a firm, invisible boundary. The dining table is not a financial desk. Keep checkbooks in drawers. Handle taxes elsewhere. Don't open utility bills where you break bread. Even digital finance apps should be left outside this zone. You can still talk about money, of course, but do it with intention, away from the space where your family is meant to feel safe, fed, and emotionally full. Because the table, in many ways, is the altar of daily life, and altars should be treated with respect. They are not dumping grounds for worry. They are gathering places for presence, and every time you clear a receipt or move a document off the table, you're sending a message, not just to the room, but to yourself. I choose to hold space for peace, even in the midst of responsibility. Mistake 2, using the table as a holding zone for keys, bags, or devices. The dining table, in its truest form, is meant to be a place of return, a gathering space, a quiet container where people come together not just to eat, but to re-enter one another's lives after a long day apart. But when that table becomes cluttered with keys, bags, phones, or even charging cables, its energetic message begins to distort. Instead of saying, "We're here now," it starts to whisper, "We're already on our way out." Think about it. Keys are tools of departure. Bags represent mobility, transit, movement, elsewhere. And phones are open portals to 1,000 competing timelines. None of these items are neutral. When they were placed on the table, even for convenience, they redirect the room's energy. What could be an altar of grounded presence becomes a launch pad, a holding zone, a waiting room for whatever's next. This disruption may not be loud or obvious. In fact, it often hides in plain sight. But over time, the message becomes embedded in the nervous system. Meals are shorter, eye contact drops, conversations feel distracted or transactional. People check their screens between bites or glance at their car keys during dessert. What should feel like the softest part of the day, shared time around a table, starts to carry an edge, a sense of temporariness, an unspoken urge to move on. From an energetic perspective, this is a subtle but powerful shift. In Feng Shui, what you place on a surface influences the qi that gathers around it. A table cluttered with signals of motion cannot hold stillness. It cannot anchor, and if that space, meant to symbolize connection and nourishment, is filled with reminders of departure, then connection begins to dissolve. Not because anyone intended it, but because the objects themselves redirect the emotional flow. There's a deeper emotional layer to this as well. When children or partners see that phones or bags dominate the table space, it sends a quiet message. Being reachable is more important than being present. That somewhere else matters more than this moment. And even when the table is technically shared, the energy is already scattered. Fortunately, this isn't a difficult pattern to shift. It just requires a small but intentional boundary. Create a designated tray near the front door, somewhere beautiful, somewhere intentional. Let it become the place where keys rest, where phones are paused, where bags are set down before entering the space of presence. This isn't about restriction, it's about respect. It's about honoring the table as something sacred, not because it's expensive or rare, but because it holds the everyday rituals that shape your relationships. I've worked with families who experienced profound change from this one shift. In one home, a couple found that simply relocating their phones to a woven basket by the door led to fewer evening arguments. They began to linger after meals, talk more deeply, even clean up together without prompt. Nothing else changed, just the energetic signal. The table went from being a pit stop to becoming a point of return, a space that said, "You're here and you're welcome to stay." Because that's the real power of the dining table. It's not about meals alone. It's about the emotional tone it sets for the rest of the home. And when that tone is one of rootedness, presence, and attentiveness, the effects ripple far beyond dinner. They shape how we rest, how we plan, how we connect. So tonight, before the next meal, take a quiet inventory. What's on your table? What doesn't belong? What's pointing your family away from the now? And how would it feel to reclaim that space as a place to land? Mistake 3, allowing broken or worn out items to stay. Some things in the home go unnoticed, not because they're invisible, but because we've quietly accepted their decline. A chipped bowl still holds soup, a frayed napkin still cleans, a wobbly chair still offers a seat. And yet, each time we interact with these worn-out objects, something subtle is absorbed, not through logic, but through energy, through repeated contact. The message is simple, and it lands in the body before the mind can argue. This is good enough. I don't need better. I'll make do. In Feng Shui and in Buddhist thought alike, this unconscious tolerance for disrepair reflects a deeper pattern, one of attachment to what no longer serves. In Buddhist philosophy, clinging to the old is one of the root causes of suffering. It blocks the flow of renewal. It signals to the universe and to ourselves that we are not yet ready to receive something more aligned, more whole, more supportive. And in the context of the dining table, a place that should represent nourishment, rest, and quiet abundance, this kind of signal can be especially corrosive. When you serve a beautiful meal in a chipped dish, the food may still be delicious, but the energy is incomplete. When your hand wipes the table with a napkin whose edges are unraveling, the motion may be routine, but the subconscious reads lack. And when you sit in a chair that leans or creaks or never quite supports you fully, your body carries that subtle discomfort through the entire meal. What begins as no big deal gradually becomes a quiet pattern of self-minimization. And that pattern affects more than just aesthetics. It influences how we make decisions, how we set boundaries, how we handle money, how we allow ourselves to be seen. Because the truth is, what surrounds us becomes part of our internal language. And when that language is compromised, our sense of worth and wealth becomes compromised too. This is not about perfectionism, it's about self-respect. You don't need a designer table or handcrafted ceramics to create an energetically rich dining space. You only need intention, wholeness, care. A $3 bowl without cracks holds better chai than a $300 one that's chipped and ignored, because it speaks to presence, to readiness, to the simple but powerful act of honoring your space, and by extension, yourself. I often encourage clients to walk around their dining area with fresh eyes, not critically, but curiously. What have I kept here out of habit? What am I using that no longer reflects who I've become or who I'm trying to become? And more importantly, what is this object saying to me quietly every time I touch it? The invitation isn't to throw everything out. It's to start with one item, just one. This week, choose to replace something around your table that's damaged, dull, or energetically tired. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't even have to be new. It only needs to be whole, chosen, resonant with the kind of energy you wish to cultivate: stability, abundance, clarity. Because at the end of the day, the dining table isn't just a place where meals are served. It's a place where stories are told, ideas are shared, and values are reinforced silently through every plate and chair and gesture. When the objects that live on that table are whole, the people who gather there begin to feel more whole too. Mistake 4, using the dining table as a storage area. Somewhere between breakfast and bedtime, the dining table begins to disappear. Not literally, of course, but energetically. One day it's set for a quiet meal, the next it's holding laundry, unopened mail, grocery bags, or things you meant to put away but didn't. You tell yourself it's temporary, just until you sort that pile, fold those clothes, handle that return. But by the end of the week, the table is no longer a table. It's a landing zone, a dumping ground, and energetically speaking, its purpose has collapsed. In Feng Shui, the dining table is not just a piece of furniture, it's a pivot point, a bridge between nourishment and communication. It holds the pulse of the home. When used intentionally, it gathers qi, invites conversation, and supports stability. But when it becomes cluttered, it doesn't just look messy, it blocks flow. And blocked flow, in energetic terms, is one of the quickest paths to blocked fortune. People often wonder why, despite working hard, their income feels stuck, why ideas don't move, why conversations stall or plans go unfinished. The answers aren't always in spreadsheets or strategy sessions. Sometimes they're sitting silently in a pile of envelopes you haven't opened, a stack of clean clothes you haven't put away, a dusty candle shoved to one corner of the table. These things don't just take up space. They hold up energy. They signal indecision, delay, avoidance, none of which support the vibration of wealth or progress. This isn't about perfectionism. It's about energetic clarity. The dining table should breathe. It should hold the spaciousness even when meals aren't happening. Because when a space is clear, it's available to possibility, to intimacy, to rest, and to wealth, not just in financial terms, but in how supported and expansive life feels. I once visited a home where the dining table hadn't been used for meals in nearly a year. It was covered in paperwork, old magazines, and seasonal decor that had long since lost relevance. The owner, a freelance designer, confessed she hadn't booked a new client in 6 months and felt creatively clogged. She'd tried advertising, updating her portfolio, even reworking her website. Nothing helped. But within 1 week of clearing that table and keeping it open, she received 2 inquiries without doing anything else. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe energy simply had space to move again. So here's a gentle challenge. Even if you don't eat at your table every day, keep it clean. Not bare, but composed. A bowl of fruit, a cloth runner, a single candle, something that reminds the space in you of its purpose, to gather, to center, to hold what matters. This isn't about aesthetic, it's about alignment. When your environment reflects clarity, your decisions begin to follow. And if you're tempted to just set something down for a moment, ask yourself, is this a temporary habit or a permanent signal? Because every item we place without intention slowly rewrites the function of that space. The dining table isn't meant to hold everything, it's meant to hold presence. When it's respected, it becomes more than a surface. It becomes a quiet, powerful invitation to return, to connect, to receive. Final matter. Somewhere between routine and intention, there's a place we often forget to look, our own dining table. Not for food, not for decor, but for evidence of what we're signaling to the world. Because wealth doesn't always arrive through strategy. Sometimes it arrives quietly. When we show life, we're ready to host it. In both Feng Shui and Buddhist-informed philosophy, we find this truth repeated in different forms. The external reflects the internal. A table set with care, cleared with thoughtfulness, becomes more than just wood and fabric. It becomes a mirror. It says, I am creating space for clarity, for nourishment, for connection, and yes, for abundance. This isn't about expensive furniture or curated Instagram aesthetics. It's about resonance. It's about choosing every day to shape our surroundings in a way that supports who we're becoming, not just who we've been. When your space feels heavy, it's hard to make light decisions. But when your space feels intentional, it gives your mind the room to breathe and your energy the room to rise. So here's a simple, gentle challenge. Tonight, before you go to bed, look at your table. Really look. Choose one object that doesn't support your next chapter and let it go. Replace it with something that does, even if it's just a single fresh flower in a teacup. This isn't decoration, it's declaration. It's you saying, I'm clearing space for what matters. And if this video helped you see your dining space in a new light, please share it with someone else who's quietly cultivating a life of calm and prosperity. Leave a comment below and tell me, what are you removing from your table? And what beautiful energy are you inviting in? If you haven't already, I warmly invite you to subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. We're just a few steps away from reaching our 2,000 follower milestone. And every like, every share, every comment brings us closer to sharing more of this grounded, practical wisdom with homes and hearts that truly need it.